Hello, world changers. Welcome to the Change Your World podcast, the show where we aim to create a positive ripple effect by sharing ideas, inspiration, tools, and techniques to help you live life better. I'm Suzy Beaumont, and I am a personal development consultant, stress solutions coach, and founder of Change Your World. Do check out what we do and all the other rest of our work at changeyourworld.me. My guest today is Will Murtha. Will is an author and a transformation coach running TLC and Create Your Own Life Story with his wife, Jayne. Together, they help authors to publish their own books, deliver training, workshops, and leadership development. Now, I've known Will for over 12 years now, and we first met when I interviewed him on BBC Radio Scotland about his near-death experience, which he wrote about in his book, Dying for a Change, which I highly recommend. This book I have honestly bought for everybody, and I tell everybody about your story because it is the most incredible read ever. So I highly recommend it. And we will touch on that in the podcast that we're going to talk about today. But today is all about your latest book, Create Your Own Life Story, which is a book of mindset tools that everybody needs, but so few are taught. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. As I've said many times before, I do believe the key to positively changing the world is through our own personal growth and development. And having read Will's new book, from cover to cover, this is a perfect handbook to support your own transformation. But before we deep dive into your book, Will, I want you to share how Will Murtha got to this point, because it's not always been like this, and you certainly weren't using the skills that you're promoting in your book today. So take us back to what I would describe as the old, unawakened Will Murtha. What were you like?
Thank you, first of all, Suzy, for having me on today.
And, it's always a pleasure.
And the way you've set it up, I hope we're okay for the next 7 hours. This is going to be a long time.
Well, you know what it's like when we get together. We set the world to rights and it doesn't take 7 hours. So, yeah, bear with us, folks.
No, we promise we're only going to go for an hour, so don't worry.
I can't promise that.
So, yeah, I mean, me and you, one of the best things was linking up with you when you were at BBC Radio Scotland, and you wanted to share my story, and we'd done it was a big audience, wasn't it, at the time, if I remember? And which is not bad.
Obviously, that's all gone down since I've left.
You were my unofficial agent, of course you were. And but no, I mean, seriously, going back to 1999 when I had the accident, I barely even recognise that person now, because that person was very driven, 24/7, faster, quicker, more. You could not have a different person from the person that is coaching people today on the very things, that I struggled with back in 1999. So the problem is, and I won't go too much into my story, but, we had quite a hard upbringing with my brothers. My dad was a big drinker. He liked drink a bit too much. Which meant we lost out on some things, but in other things we still had a loving family. So we had a great upbringing. But I suppose because me and my brothers grew up with not very much, and all the other kids around us did have quite a lot, it makes you very driven and sort of focused on wanting to improve your life better going forward for yourself. So if I share something
wrong with that, but it was more you were driving yourself in the materialistic sense. It's the house, the trappings, the car.
I think what tends to happen with hindsight 23 years later, I mean, when we met, we were just children, Suzy. I mean, but the thing is, you don't realise, but often you can overshoot it. And what I mean by that is that depending on what your childhood is, you can overcompensate too much. So because we didn't want to experience, I wouldn't say extreme poverty, but we had a hard upbringing. Because me and my two brothers didn't want to experience that again for ourselves, and particularly with me with having a young family, I was absolutely determined with all the passion and desire that you could muster up to make sure that I would not go back to that kind of living. So of course, you almost become a perfectionist, but you become a workaholic. And at the very time that I was probably ready to start, burning in a bad way, I'd had many, many years in the kind of late 80s, through the 90s of starting off sort of really lowly, working in a builder's merchant yard, and then going up to salesman, and then sales manager, sales director, owning my own company, and part of a big company as a main board director. It kind of, I just didn't know when to stop. And the problem is, when you are a hard worker, as you've been there as well, you don't realize you're caught. It's a bit like a fish doesn't know it's in water. It thinks water is the only environment that it's got. It doesn't realize there's air and another land, and a bit like that when you're a workaholic, which I was in late 99, a chronic one, I would say. You don't realize, because everyone else around you is part of the same team. It's very much an echo chamber. Would have been like you at the BBC. You're kind of driven. You want to be the best. You want to do the best work. You put in 18 hours, sometimes days, and you don't think anything of it because everyone else is doing it. But what I started to do, I started to realize, this is kind of coming back for work. I kind of started to realize that my drinking started to get worse. My drug problems started to kick up. It was nothing was ever good enough. My expectations of myself and my team were getting more and more, and you can just feel this cascade in your life is kind of falling apart. And
it's just this general kind of feeling of malaise and disease and just general unhappiness, and you're turning to recreational drugs and drink to kind of null out those feelings, really.
Yeah, you kind of know that there's something wrong, but you're not sure either. It's sort of, you're caught in that paradox, aren't you? You've got a sense, call it. You've got a sense that something's not firing. And what I ended up doing is that I started to realize that I wasn't getting this. Nothing was giving me a buzz, and nothing was kind of kicking it off. And it was extreme lows and extreme highs, which then starts to sort of, that's what starts to happen. And I got to a point where, literally on the months before I had my near-death experience in April 1999, there was this sense that my life was unraveling. I was going out of control. My behaviors were getting more erratic. My moods were highs and lows. And you kind of sense that it's all coming apart. And then, obviously, I had the near-death experience, which now I know in retrospect, looking back, so many near-death experiences, almost like being ordained, they come into a time of your life often where you actually need a service station break. You need to pull out of the nosedive, and that's what my near-death...
You need the course direction, don't you? And I mean...
You do.
The near-death experience or the course direction can come in so many ways, whether it's losing a loved one, a health scare, an injury, an accident, and they are course directions to kind of get you to think what's important in life, because all of a sudden the attachments that we put on everything and we think is important, suddenly in that moment when you have a life-changing moment or, life-changing news that is just going to change the whole course going forward, suddenly none of that matters. If you're delivered news about your health, for example, and you're told perhaps you've got cancer, suddenly you're thinking, oh, my job's not important, this argument with such and such wasn't important, that all the getting the latest thing for my house or the latest car, not important. It just literally drops all those attachments. However, it takes somebody smacking us around the face with a baseball bat for that to happen. But let's talk about, we won't cover the whole story because it's a very long story, but it's an incredible, amazing story. And your book, Dying for a Change, that was your first book. I highly recommend it. It's not available at the moment, is that right? But it will be.
It's sold out of the initial, and then we've bought the rights from the American publisher, which will be reprinting it under our own publishing house early next year. So that's exciting, yeah.
There will be secondhand copies that you can probably find online, so I do recommend that. But you take it. You tell us what, because take us from the point of the radio interview that you had, and then to the actual accident?
So, so April 1999, on this particular day, things have been leading up to a few months. I'd had a bit of illness. I had a few things kind of happening on the edge. And you do get warning shots, don't you, across the bow? You do get warning shots. I believe that. And if you're not paying attention to life, life's going to go, I'm going to give you a bigger sledgehammer. I'm going to hit you harder. And that's what kind of happened to me. So
more pain.
Yeah, if you don't listen to the universe and to our life signs and what's happening, I'm a very big believer, obviously, like the Jungian concept of synchronicity, and meaningful coincidences, because they do happen. That's what I come to believe. And coached enough people over the years to realize that. But on this particular day, I've been listening to a radio show, and this radio show had really kind of connected with me. I think it might have even been BBC Radio 4, and it was basically talking about how so many people are feeling a bit disjointed in their own life and disconnected from it. And although they're materialistically outwardly rich, they're inwardly poor. My God, it's one of those things, where sometimes a kind of conversation, a word, the topic kind of grabs you. It was, although I was busy and racing around as normal, I actually did something I rarely did before. I pulled off at the service station to listen intently to this interview, and it was basically laying my life out. It was, and that's what's great about books, about interviews, about stuff you watch, is that if it mirrors exactly where you are in your life, you tend to pay attention more. Yeah. And this interview sort of laid my life out in bare bones and basically said, you can have all the materialistic trappings that life gives you. You can work hard. You can have as much money as you want. We had a great life. Might change my BMW every year, on good salary. I was, quite high up in the
abroad, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Two big holidays abroad, and taking clients. My expense budget was non-stop. So, we could do what we wanted. And the problem is the more things you get to distract you, the worse it is, because you've got money as a means of kind of shutting down that emotional sort of disquiet that's inside of you, as I've now come to appreciate with hindsight and wisdom all these years later. So, the more money you've got, it actually makes it worth, because you can shut down that voice, that emotions. And I always talk about it, and you've heard me say this before, Suzy, it's a bit like putting a beach ball in the water. You can keep holding your emotions down, but eventually it's going to tire you out, and eventually that beach ball is going to get its own way, and it's going to pop back up to the surface. And, on this
analogy.
Yeah, it's true. And so on this one particular day, I listened to this interview, felt a bit strange all day, got back because I was away a lot of my job. And this one particular day, I was going back to my home in Dawlish in Devon, and put my children to bed, and then went out on my normal bike ride, which was a weird kind of way of, and a lot of people do this. When they're stressed and pressurized, they will not use exercise as a healthy way of well-being. They will use exercise as a way of really hurting themselves, because a bit like extreme sports, if you're sometimes really hurting yourself physically and pushing yourself to the limits, it's so painful, which it was for me, I really did push myself, that you wouldn't be able to let the emotions push through to the surface. I couldn't hear them then. And on this one particular day, I'm sort of pedaling along the seawall that runs right next to a railway line, and out of nowhere, a freak wave sort of came 20 foot up over the wall, knocked me off my bike. Second wave came in almost like instantly, and literally I had nowhere to go. And as the wave kind of hit the back wall where the railway line was, it washed back down over the edge. Before I know it, I'm tumbling backwards thinking, oh my God, I'm going to land on the rocks below. I missed the rocks miraculously, hit the freezing cold water, come and, sort of punched the air as I came back up again for air, and suddenly realized, the next wave came in and slapped me up against an algae covered wall. And I realized this was like every sort of 10 seconds. If I don't get out of here, I'm finished. And, I was quite fit at that time, sort of 34 at the time, still played sort of semi-professional football, relatively fit for my age. But even so, very quickly, in a few minutes, I was starting to tire and get exhausted. And I looked out towards the waves, and by now it's starting to get dark. No one's about. And I looked out towards the waves, and I could see that if I could swim kind of 40, 50 meters, it would be a lot flatter. So I used all my strength that I could to get out onto that, quieter part of the water. And I literally just laid there and kind of just tried to gather my thoughts and decide what was next. Because, there's an algae covered wall, which is 20 feet as far as I could see left and right. There's no way of escape. It's getting dark. No one's around at that time of night walking their dog. And it started to dawn on me, how am I going to get out?
Yeah.
And that's where
if you weren't somewhere you could just swim to shore, you were surrounded by wall and you couldn't climb up or anything like that. You were either going out to sea or getting slam dunked against the wall. There wasn't.
No. So, the panic is where it started to set in then. The realization, yes, it was a lot calmer and I could lay on my back. I had a weird experience literally in a few minutes. I went to take my fleece off and literally this voice come in and said to me, keep your fleece on. And it startled me in such a sort of profound way that I actually kept my fleece on, which ended up...
Because you were trying to take your fleece off because you felt it was pulling you down and you were getting weighted down.
Exactly.
This voice came in very clear to you to say, no, you need that because you're going to get...
I mean, it's mad. We've all got this inner voice. We know it. We coach on it now. It's called your inner critic or inner coach, which is basically self-talk. But this voice was so much more louder, like a megaphone of your own inner wisdom, call it, that, it was almost frightening me to the point that of course I'm going to pay attention to it. And it started to dawn on me that even now, sort of, this is 10, 15 minutes or so after I've sort of gone into the water, already my body's starting to, I can feel aching limbs and joints, and the hypothermia is starting to kick in already. I started to panic, I started to get angry. I started to really sort of think about all the things that you've not lived, the life you've kind of took for granted. My children are going to get married and I won't be there. And then your mind just sort of unravels in bizarre, weird ways. I was insured for this is a silly little story, a little caveat, but, I was insured for quite a bit of money through my company. My wife would have sort of had her mortgage paid for and probably £1 million in at the time. Well, it's a lot of money now, but, back in 99, it was a lot of money. And I was really angry that someone's going to come in and inherit my life.
Enjoy all that.
Right? Enjoy all that, not have to work like I have. And happy days, the mortgage is paid for. She can have a new partner, get married. Someone else is going to give my children away.
I mean, I'm sure she would have went through a grieving process. There would have been a window.
Unfortunately, you don't go through that. You're in the water and it's like you're building on worst case scenario. You're kind of catastrophizing. And then there's a lot of anger at myself at living a life of, kind of just working and sort of I'm going to start living properly tomorrow. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't not having a good life, but it was so much focused on work as my identity, like a lot of people are today, that I felt that I was delaying life to do all the things that I wanted to do for another day. Of course, I kind of realized in that moment in the water, there will be no other days. This is pretty much it. And so...
it's that kind of realization that, really what's important, the values in life and how much you've been wasting life just by doing work. Now, work is important. It, generates lots of things for us, but it is that moment of, wow, I really like, Bronnie Ware talks about this in her book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying. She was a palliative care nurse, and, one of the top 5 regrets was people saying, I wish I hadn't worked more and I wish I'd had the courage to be myself and live my dreams. And that's what comes up when,
it did.
And I mean, I've not had experiences like yours, but I've had it in other times. I'm just thinking, why am I wasting my life? Why am I putting so much energy into this? So take us back. You're in the sea, you're in that boat, and I'm conscious we can't cover the whole story because there's so much, but you did have this really divine intervention. Is that how you describe it? Or?
Yeah, it's hard to kind of explain the unexplainable, isn't it? But putting it in a nutshell is that, very quickly the hypothermia started to grab me. I started to slip in and out of consciousness. And I started to sort of dream, and I started to kind of lose where I was. Anyway, I kind of slipped into this this time frame, almost like where I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or in the real state. I know the pain had started to go away, and that kind of scared me. Most people talk about a life review. I didn't seem to have a kind of life review. I seemed to have like significant moments. So my mind was going to significant moments, my children getting born, getting married, other good things, plus other bad things as well, which I won't go into now. But, it was basically like these snapshots of different live parts of my life that were significant emotionally, good or bad. But the big thing for me was that, and again, this is where the whole book came from, really, is that I started to have a conversation with what I thought to begin with was my own higher self, my own kind of inner. We've all got self-talk, we've all got inner critic, inner coach, and I thought I was kind of conversing with myself. But what turned out is that I'm starting to ask myself questions to queries and curiosity that I'd sort of carried all my life. And like a two-way conversation, I was starting to get an answer back to my questions for life. And it was bizarre at the beginning, but then I kind of let go and sort of accepted it and just ran with it. And before I knew it, I'm having this conversation, which seemed to go, bearing in mind I was in the water about 2 hours, as it turns out. But this conversation seemed to go on for weeks. And it basically kind of answered all the questions that I'd always asked of life, about emotions, about things that I picked up from my mother, like, synchronicities and, oversensitivity, all those kind of things that have been hanging there for many, many years. I was having this conversation and they were being explained to me. Mm-hmm. And anyway, at the end of this conversation, I kind of come round again and realize it really is dark now. And I'm looking up, stars are sort of, and the full moon is looking down on me. And I'd done something that I'd never done before in my life. I just started to pray. And, I wasn't a religious person, far from it. But it was almost like instinctual, and I started to pray. And I looked towards the coast, and there was a high wall, and there was a guy waving to me, and the guy kind of shouted, "Do you want any help?" Which always makes me laugh, because what does he think I was? What was I doing at that time of night in the dark, swimming alone, drowning?
Right, mate. I was just dying of hypothermia.
I just, that's always made me laugh. Anyway, this lovely guy, Nathan, it turns out, who was a local, lived in a block of flats by the railway line. Anyway, he managed to, what turns out is he ended up firing something out, like a buoy, to get me, because the emergency services were taking too long. And they ended up pulling me almost like a fish on a hook. They managed to pull me a few hundred meters along. By now, there was a lot of waiting people with torches and an ambulance crew. And I don't really remember much between that and the hospital, which is in Torquay, about half an hour ago. They apparently whizzed me up a zigzag up to the main road, got me to Torquay, and worked on me to get my core body temperature up again. And then the next thing, I'm kind of waking up and it's the morning, and thinking, oh my God, what has happened to this, situation? What have I just gone through? What was the conversation about? What was the hypothermia, the reruns of life from past tense? And I just remember thinking, I'm never going to be the same again. And you know what it's like, Suzy. Any of us that have big traumatic events, we tell ourselves we're going to change our life. I didn't change my life for the next kind of year and a half.
Even without the big trauma, we're constantly telling ourselves we're going to change. We're going to start the diet on Monday. We're going to, not moan at our partner. We're not going to, whatever it might be. We sit constantly and then find ourselves just doing it. We're back on autopilot, just doing it. Even with the big. You did have a big life-changing thing, but
yeah.
You were in that. You had the near-death experience without even the divine intervention. You've had this conversation, and you're what you describe as a very ordinary, mainstream bloke. This doesn't happen to people like you. You're not out there, and you're thinking, how can I even begin to tell people what's happened.
You can't process it. And what was even more extraordinary, which I haven't mentioned yet, is that, I met the guy the next day who had spotted me. And I met the guy. He came up to my house. There was papers there, loads of photos. It was in some of the national papers. I didn't realize at the time that there was a story being run, because I just thought he'd spotted me and that was it. It turned out he'd borrowed a telescope that very day. His friend
don't tell the story, because it's such an amazing twist at the end of the book. You're just like, whoa.
You can't make this up, because, he'd been saying to his friend for months, let me borrow your telescope. 9 months later, on the very afternoon of the evening I go in, he gets a telescope from his friend, sets it up to look at the moon, goes away in his top floor flat to make a drink, comes back, realizes the telescope's dropped, thinks to himself, oh, that's a bit strange. Anyway,
he's got it all set up, it's pointing high in the sky, and he goes away and it's dropped.
And it comes back and it's dropped. And he said, my instinct should have been reset it to look at the moon again. And he said, I had this gut instinct to look through the telescope. At the very point that he looked through the telescope, that's where I was floundering in the water.
And very incredible as well.
And these things, the chances are just too extraordinary, too extraordinary. And I think that whole event, the synchronicity of the 1 in a billion chance of survival, combined with the conversation, combined with the almost mini life review that you had, it was all too much for my little left brain to kind of conceive and hold. So I did, like a lot of people when they have extraordinary events that defy their rationale, their logic, I kind of just shut up. And for 18 months, I just didn't say anything to anyone. I didn't say anything to my best friends. I didn't say anything to my wife at the time. I couldn't conceptualize and articulate the immensity of what had gone on. So I did the best thing, which was put up, shut up, and get back to normal. My director at the time rang me and said, do you want weeks off? Because obviously it's traumatic, what you've gone through. This was like late in the week. I think the accident happened on Thursday. He rang me on the Friday. I said, no, I'll be back to work on the Monday. And everyone was like, are you sure? But that was my male kind of dominant, arrogant, ignorant kind of mindset. That
like, la, avoid this. I'm not dealing with this.
Oh, I cannot deal with it. It's too big. Too big, can't process it. Them emotions, they might be 5 beach balls, but I'm going to keep them in the water as much. Of course, we know that that's exhausting.
Yeah.
And anyway, a year and a half goes on, and my drinking is still getting worse because I'm trying to suppress the emotion. Drugs are coming in there, bad behavior. Everything that I could do to self-destruct was coming in. And I'm actually worse than at the time of the accident. And I'm not listening to that inner voice that is trying to tell me, no, come on, guy, wake up. You've had an extraordinary experience. That's what the near-death experience is meant to be for, to wake you up and change your life.
Frustrating for whoever was
and the breakthrough came. I was taking a group of clients to Amsterdam for a football tournament. And we've been drinking all day, and we were in the bar at 3 o'clock in the morning in a basement bar in Amsterdam. And we're off our heads, and this voice just come in from nowhere, a bit like the voice in the water. And this voice just come in, and it said, this is not who you are or where you're meant to be. And I swear, it was like a cold slap across the face, or having a cold bucket of water poured over you. I literally sobered up in that second. And it suddenly dawned on me, oh my God, I nearly died 18 months ago. I am nearly going to die again if I don't pay attention to pull my life back from this. And that was the moment that suddenly it realized, the light bulb went off. I do not want to live like this anymore. I'm going to have to bring this truth out. And I was really quiet the next day on the way back to the UK. Very quickly, I decided to make some changes, and I started to write the story down. I would wake up at 12, 1 o'clock in the morning or 4 in the morning. I'd be writing the story down as I remember it, as I remember the conversation. This went on for a couple of
years. Knowledge all there? Was it just flowing out of you?
Well, the best way I can describe it, I kind of put the bolt and braces to, because bearing in mind, I'd not read a book for 20 years because I'm, chronically dyslexic and dyspraxic. From the age of 14, because I remember the abuse at school of, standing up and reading the paragraph, and I was awful at that. It put me completely off of reading to the point that I had not read a proper book, factual.
That was a massive hurdle to overcome.
Or fictional. I'd not read a book for 20 years, up until the moment of having that near-death experience in 1999. And so what had happened is that I started to, on the recollect, call it, all the memories and the conversation, the insights. I kind of laid it out how I'm going to remember it and how I'm going to tell the story, because the insights and the wisdom were just too big for me to hold. So I literally, over a few years, I got myself a professional writing tutor, Katie from Falkirk, who just by coincidence, as I started writing, had moved down to Devon from Scotland. And so I it's one of those synchronistic things. I picked up the paper. There's her face looking at me. I have everything to owe to her, because she helped me to become a writer, because I'd struggled before that. I couldn't even write an invitation to a client without one of my PAs saying, give me that 2 lines, I'll rewrite it. That's how bad it was. And so I gradually, in this next few years, with a writing tutor one side, with a dedicated practice to get this work out there, went over to America, done the LA Book Expo, got a publisher, California publisher, and the rest kind of slotted into place. But, I that was the start of a process that realized that, this is not who you are. This is not what you want to be in sales and construction industry. I kind of, really jumped on the whole coaching bandwagon, 10 years ago, and decided to retrain. And kind of, this is where me and Jayne set up our business 8 years ago, TLC, where we, because Jayne's had I won't go into it, but Jayne's had a very similar experience to me. If you swap near-death experience in the water to near-death experience rape, that was Jayne, my wife's journey. So we kind of, when we set the business up nearly 9 years ago, we both were coming at it from different, high performance, my end, counseling background, hers the other. And so we kind of forged a company together, knowing that we can coach people from both ends of the spectrum. And my God, come back to your initial question, we now live a completely different life, and our days are very different to what they were before.
The days now are more in service to other people. You're practicing your own skills, your own growth, your own development, but you're in service to other people. Whereas in construction, you were providing a service, but very different. It wasn't about developing people. And, this is what I always say, if we want to positively change the world or make a difference, and even in our own world, we have to look at our pain. We have to look at the nagging emotions, the things that we're avoiding, and we've got to lean into it. And this is essentially what you do now. You work with people to help them navigate through those painful areas in life, that the patterns that keep coming up, that kind of thing. So your book, where we've got it now, Create Your Own Life Story. This is probably the most comprehensive handbook of personal development tools and techniques I've ever read. Honestly, it's just filled with so much knowledge and wisdom that you can, when you're reading it, you can tell that you've lived it, breathed it, you've practiced it, and you really believe in it. It's not just let's put that in, it sounds good kind of thing, which you do get in other books and what have you. So, where you're at now with this book, given how difficult change is, because we both know how difficult change is, there's all the different stages of change: denial, what will people think of us, like, who am I if I'm not that person, letting go of the old identity. Where does a person start if they want to start making changes in their life?
I mean, first of all, you've got to, you know, let me start at the beginning. So who do we tend to coach? Who do we tend to coach? We tend to coach people at one end of the scale who are very successful, top achievers. So, you know, my MPs, footballers, you know, elite sports, influencers, TV people, corporate heads, anyone at that end that is the top of their game. That is what I call my high performance lane of clients. There are other people in the middle lane who are doing okay. They're doing so-so, and but there's something missing. They just want to kind of take it up a few gears now. It's all become a bit ordinary. Nothing's going too bad with them. It's all a bit mundane. They want a bit more life force. So that's the middle group. Then there's the extreme group, which is what we're seeing more and more of, especially the last few years with the pandemic. Is the group where they're coming apart at the seams. They've lost hope. They've lost direction. They've lost a sense of who they are. That group is ballooning. We're seeing that group get bigger and bigger. I would call it like they're on the bottom of the sea. So if the middle group are kind of buzzing along on the top of the waves, you know, floating on top of the waves, if the high performers are up in the sky by the stars, the people that we're seeing more and more come to us in coaching now are the people that are literally bobbing along the bottom of the seabed, and they're struggling, and there's trauma coming. You know, we've all gone through, haven't they? You know, post-traumatic stress
in the last 2 years.
You know, post-traumatic stress disorder used to be for, oh, that person that had a wreck, that person that had a major loss and grief, oh, that person that's lost a friend in Iraq, you know, in the war. You know, trauma would be losing your dog, losing your loved one, losing something big. Now, the whole planet in the last few years has gone through a collective post-traumatic stress disorder event. Mm-hmm. And what happens with trauma, and this is why I'm really interested in the next couple of years, I studied trauma and near-death experiences for 10 years. One of the world's top researchers, a woman called Evelyn Vallerino, lives in Switzerland, Geneva. She wrote a book with Kenneth Ring called Lessons from the Light. She and Kenneth had interviewed over 30,000 people on change through trauma, you know, and what I think we're going to see in this next couple of years now, if we take the same model that I went through, that Jayne went through, that the 30,000 people mostly went through, they tended to have a period where you had the big trauma, and then they have a reflective period where they're lost afterwards. You know, call it the no man's land and no woman's land afterwards. It's a confusion of void. You don't know who you are anymore. The identity's sort of kind of, it's not on the old island, but it's not yet on the new island. Yeah. And you know, then you get to this point where the trauma, like the last few years, is so intense, and what we've gone through is so big for the 8.5 billion people. I think now we're moving into that kind of coming out of the tunnel. You know, we've had the event in the tunnel. We're coming out of the tunnel now. It's going to be really interesting, because what I think and what I see in every client that we're dealing with is that it's almost like a wasp that's been sort of squatted. It's a bit dazed. You know, this time of year, wasps are a bit kind of dozy, aren't they? Mm. That's what I believe humanity is going through at the moment, in that, you know, we're not quite sure what on earth has gone on the last few years. Most of us haven't processed and dealt with those emotions in the tunnel. I always talk about the earthquake analogy. You've heard me describe this before, which I talk about in the introduction. Most buildings do not fall down in the, you know, during an earthquake. They fall down in the many after quakes, you know, after the initial earthquake. And I think people are experiencing that now. What we're seeing with clients, they're kind of a bit bemused, they're confused, they're kind of petrified, they're not really understanding what's going on. Look, the pandemic's over there. That's kind of, we're out the tunnel now. I should be starting to feel better. I'm actually feeling worse now than I was in the pandemic, when at least I was kind of seemed to have some of it together. Whereas now I'm kind of falling apart. And I think this next few years, I think we're all going through a post-traumatic stress disorder event collectively. And if you study the work of people like Steve Taylor and a few others who are starting to really talk about post-traumatic growth, which comes after post-traumatic stress, that is an invitation. Don't get me wrong, we're not all going to go through post-traumatic growth, because some people will not be able to face it. and they will just crumble, or they will shrink back, or whatever. A bit like the best analogy is like popcorn.
Yeah, I love this analogy.
We get this lovely bag of popcorn, don't we? And we put it in the microwave, and it says, microwave for 2.5, 3 minutes. We put it in there. Within seconds, some popcorn is already popping. You're like, merrily for the next few minutes, and away it goes. You pour the popcorn out after 3 minutes. There's a load of popcorn in there that's not even opened.
Yeah.
What do you do? Most people, tight ass like me, I put it back in, put it back on. It starts popping again. Take it out. There is some belligerent, popcorn who would rather shrink and die than open up. Yeah. Now, I know it's a kind of crass sort of analogy, but I do believe that's what people are going to be like. Some people were popping at the beginning part of this pandemic and doing the work being self-reflection, self-analysis, and all the things that change your world that you do and I do with my company. Some people are really grabbing personal development with both hands and going, I'm going to go through the pain barrier. Others are trying to put their hands over their eyes, stick the blanket over their head, and kind of, I wish change would go away.
Yeah.
Everything in between. And I think the ones that are going to do well, we've coached enough people over the last 10 years to know this. The ones that are going to thrive, and not just survive, are going to be the ones that grab personal development, that really do change their world, that really do create their own life story. It's going to be the ones that have the courage to go through and deal with those suppressed emotions that we felt in the last few years.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, the popcorn, we spoke about this last week, and I just thought that was I actually told somebody today that analogy, because it is that thing when, we have all gone through this pandemic and nobody's come out unscathed. We've all had the trauma or, the experience collectively that shocked us to our core, where we're looking at ourselves and going, what's important? What are my values? Why am I doing this? And, really reflecting. And I think the challenge we've got just now is that a lot of people were hopeful that great change was going to come as a result of the pandemic. And that it's almost a sense of, as you had with your near-death experience, you knew you had to change. However, you were like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to change it. So you just carried on doing what you're doing. And a lot of people are just carrying on doing what they're doing, but hoping it would be better and it was going to be different, and some of the crap that they put up with wouldn't be there. And it still is. There's still that stress. There's still, you're working more hours, but there's what now is happening. People, it's like the Matrix. They've taken the red pill and they've seen it and they can't unsee it, but they don't know how to change it. And that's where the anxiety and the upset and the discomfort and the pain comes from, because you're in this limbo of knowing you need to change something, but you don't have the tools to do it. You don't know how to do it. You don't know what it looks like. All of these kind of unknowns, and nothing more than anything, unknowns creates massive fear, because it's requesting you to be courageous to step into something you've no idea what the outcome's going to be. You've got to take a risk. And some people just go, well, sod it. It can't be as bad as it is now. It's the pain of going through growth and the unknown and the challenge and stepping out your comfort zone is easier, or it's not even easier, but it's more that actually the idea of staying stuck and staying where I am is more painful than going and stepping into the unknown. But there will be other people that are like, well, okay, this is shit right now, but at least I know how it works. I know what to expect. I know what happens. I don't know what's going on with my light here. It's all going funny. But yeah, so I'm gonna let some light in there. So this is what your book is about. It is giving people some tools to get them started. And I mean, how, first of all, I'm intrigued to know how you would advise somebody to use your book, because you can read it comprehensively cover to cover.
Right. A few tips.
This is your first sort of you know, take on personal development, you're going to go, oh my God, there's just too much.
Right, so warning,
very comprehensive.
Warning. So health warning to start with. do not read it cover to cover from start to finish.
You can't
do not,
you know.
Do not read it. Your head will blow up. All the wheels are going to fall off and you'll have a mental breakdown because there is so much in there. Now, the reason I set it out in different, you know, I just flicked through it actually, in different chapters, is that I want people to look at what they are struggling with at the moment. So if, for instance, overwhelm is something that you are particularly struggling with at the moment, go to overwhelm. If overthinking is something that you're struggling with, go to that chapter on overthinking. You know, for some people it will be self-discipline. Yeah. So basically, I wanted people to meet their personal development on the coalface of what they are struggling with now, because most not all, but most self-help books are so incredibly insightful, lots of wisdom, lots of experience, lots of proven tools and takeaways. But the problem is it might not be what you are dealing with at the moment. So you might be reading a fantastic book on emotions, and yet emotions might not be the number one thing that you're dealing with. It might be self-discipline you're struggling with.
Yeah.
Or
it might be sleep that you have to sort,
might be sleep,
sorted, or whatever.
You know, or it might be self-confidence, or a big one today is people's inner critic, going out of, you know, our inner critic. Once it goes mad and starts to beat you up from the inside, you know, all you end up doing is having, you know, FOPO, which is fear of other people's opinions.
We can actually probably explore it, because I know that this is language that we use all the time, but if you are listening to this, because this was one of the things when I first started being coached, I started seeing Alistair, a life coach, 12, 13, 15 years ago now. And, you know, we very much looked at its starting road with that was just about, well, what did I want? What did happiness look like to me? You know, because I'd said I wanted to be happy. And he was like, well, what does happiness look like? I'd never actually stopped to think, I don't know, what does that? And he was like, well, how can you create it if you don't know what it looks like? And then, you know, he started this process of like really getting me to monitor my thoughts. And honestly, I was like, why am I thinking that? Like, it's suddenly becoming acutely aware of the dialogue that was going on, the autopilot of the thoughts that were just churning around, and you're not even aware of them. And I mean, you know, the studies say, I mean, I've never known how they've ever managed to say this, but you have something, 70,000 thoughts a day? Something like that.
It could be 50. I mean, it varies. 50,000, it's a lot. Yeah. It's a lot more than
it's a lot, and they're happening. Yeah. And, you know, the other research shows that actually 5% is conscious, 95% is unconscious.
So you're a program. You're running a program.
Yeah. You are 95% on autopilot with all this dialogue, limiting beliefs, self-sabotage, inner critic, background pattern, is stuff that's been said in your childhood that you've long forgotten about, buried deep in there, has created a whole blueprint for you going forward that might be affecting your relationships, your financial success, your career success, your friendships, your relationship with your family, whatever. And you're not even conscious of it. And I mean, even to monitor the 5%, when you start doing that, you're like, oh man, what is going on? And you're like, that's before I even tackle the other 95%. So, you know, our thoughts are massive in terms of just building self-awareness of them. So even that, you know, when you're talking about inner critic, inner coach, you know, really just for people to listening to this to actually think, are you operating from inner coach or inner critic? What is the dialogue that's going on? And just start with that and start recording it, you know, or noting it rather than recording it.
I mean, you know, it's a complex understanding to try and get people to jump onto personal development at the beginning. Know that it is an absolute imperative, because one of the big questions I ask my clients on their very first session, in the first 10 minutes, if nothing changes, well, number one would be Alistair's question, what you mentioned brilliantly, which is, what do you want?
Yeah.
It sounds insane, but
It sounds the simplest question in the
most
world.
people do not come off of their life at the service station to have 10 minutes to ponder, to contemplate, to analyze, what do I really want? I've never really thought of that.
Everyone can
It
probably tell
blows
you
me
what
away.
they don't want. They can tell you what they would.
Oh,
like.
100 things.
Yeah.
100 things. But
Or
what do
they
you really
might
want?
say, I want to win the lottery. But you're like, okay, well, let's unpick that. Why do you want, what would winning £5 million on the lottery do for you? What would you do with that? And what are you looking for to create with that money? You know, and suddenly when you start unpicking it, you're like, oh, that's not going to give me at all. You know?
Well, the places to start. I mean, I want you to imagine that everyone's got a different doorway. For some people, personal development first doorway will be a north door. For others, it will be an east or a south or a west door. We all come at personal development in a different way because of our background and because of the way we're wired. Some people are more ADHD and OCD and obsessive behavior more than others. So one of the things that I put in the early parts of the book are I put a personal learning style. So some of us, as we know, Suzy, are auditory. You know, some of us are kinesthetic. You know, we're all different kinds of learners. So this is something that we never learn at school or college or university. What different personal learning style am I? Because there's no point in you keep reading books if reading books is not your thing, and you're better with audiobooks or videos.
Or if you're better through learning experience, you can give all the theory you want. If you don't physically try it out and do it, and this is, you know, what you're saying about schools not teaching us. Like, if we're just so many are slipping through the nets because they don't understand their own learning style, and the teacher doesn't know how to connect with the child and what is teaching. And it's the same in the workplace as well. If your boss does not take the time to understand who you are, how you operate, how you learn, and how you communicate, then you're just going to be constantly clashing, not just with your boss, but your colleagues as well. And, you know, you might be both have the same goal, but because you're communicating it differently, because you both learn differently and you operate differently, you're not understanding each other, and it's causing conflict.
You know, if someone was like tuning in today and they have never read a self-help book before, that is one of the groups that I wanted to appeal to. The reason I wrote this book in a particular way, I remember watching a video years ago with Pixar, and Pixar was showing how they we've all watched Pixar, we've all watched Toy Story, you know, Finding Nemo, Monsters Inc., you know, all the big global successes. We've all watched Pixar. I watched a program. I was fascinated in that program because what it was saying is that there is a special art to writing, which obviously they film, writing and filming, art, creativity that can appeal to a 5-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 80-year-old.
I have thought this. It's a real skill.
Right. And so I thought, what if I could write a book in my language, as in like my voice, where it's as if someone picks it up and they've never read a self-help book, they could get it. But if a lot of my friends are coaches and peers, but if they could also get a lot out of it as well. What if I could write a book like Pixar style, where it appeals to both ends of the spectrum? And that's what the ball breaker was for this book, because I probably could have written this book in like a quarter of the time. But I wanted to make sure there's no point me preaching to the converted and writing a great book for coaches and people at that end. Yeah, I'm blessed. I coach some amazing people around the world, particularly in this country, that are at the very top of their game. A lot of people would recognize them on TV. But I didn't want to write for just a very small audience there, because the growing market where we need to get more people on board is the first-time self-helpers. You know, and people that are going to start learning about their emotions, learn about stress management, learn about kind of what do I do. So I would say to the first timers here that have never read a book, never watched a video on self-help, personal development, start with your journal. Your journal will be your recorder. Basically, a journal is a notebook where you can start to write down your goals, your aspirations, what's not working for you, what is working for you, you know, where you really want to go, who you want to become, who your role models are. Your journal becomes your personal development file. It becomes your kind of survival Bible. You know, a lovely little trick and flick that I get with all of my clients in the early days when they're getting used to journaling. Yeah, don't forget, journaling is not a teenage misery memoir. It's not like those.
Yeah.
I can picture you at 15, Suzy. You know, your first
God,
broken.
all my angst, and he said this and she said that. Blah blah.
First
blah.
broken heart. You know, all in there. 20 pages of the great epic Suzy Beaumont, and but you know, we've all been there. We all wrote out
again.
But you know, it's not a teenage diary. This is an adult learning personal development book, because if you can get it down, so you basically get it out of your head down onto paper, and I know it sounds bizarre, you do see it and read it differently when it's down on paper, when it's out of your head. So yeah. I would do things like keep it weird. My mantra, as you know, is always complexity to simplicity. And if you are teaching people personal development skills, tools, practices, strategies, which are laden throughout the whole book, you've got to talk in a Twitter, Daily Mail kind of language that everyone will understand. And if you're going to share tools, they cannot be complicated psychological tools. They need to be straightforward. And one of the tools that I use is what I call an Angie list. And what you do, you basically take one page of your journal, divide it into 3, top, middle, and bottom. And this is for everything that happens to you, good or bad, because it's your way of seeing how you respond to it. So what you would do, for instance, is like you have a big event, you have a big fallout with your sister, you fall out with your mother, you have a fallout with a client, you're having a bit of a traumatic time. Whatever stress you are going through, get it down on paper. So what you would do in this example, for instance, you've fallen out with your sister. You would take that piece of paper, and on the top third, you would write down literally, this is what happened. No more than a paragraph. Just write down, this is what happened, and just get the bones of the story down without all the stuff that goes around it. Yeah. The middle section, really, really important, because emotions and feelings in the next couple of decades, we are going to find drive everything. I've done coaching enough years. I've got enough friends. This is where coaching is going in the future. It's going to be bringing more emotion into it. So the middle section of the page, what you literally write down is, this is how I felt. This is how it made me feel. If you want to put 7 different emotions, 10 different emotions, getting a grip to articulate what you actually feel is the essence. And then the third at the bottom side of the third of the page, this is how I'm going to deal with it. This is how I'm going to deal with it. Because what you're doing, rather than making that a drama over weeks or months or years, like some people do, we have people that haven't spoke to their brother or sister for 20 years because of one event that happened. Yeah. They can't even remember what happened to break them up, which is insane. So what we do, we're all going through traumatic events, more so now than I ever remember before. So use that page to literally thrash out, this is what happened, this is how I felt, this is how I'm going to deal with it. That's looking forward. What you can also do is, yourself better than anyone. What you could do is, say, for instance, a time when you've overcome an obstacle, overcome a challenge, but you've lost kind of confidence, which we all do from time to time. You've kind of lost belief and confidence that you could do it again. What you do is write down the same again format, but in a past tense. So this is what happened. This is how I felt at the time. Yeah. And this is how I dealt with it and overcame it. So that then becomes a playbook, a roadmap of how you can do it again. Now, that's just one little tool. Go to the journal. In fact, if you go on my website, there's a free, the chapter all on journaling is free. You can download that for free. And
give us the website address while you've mentioned it.
Right. So it's www.createyourownlifestory.com. all in one. And go on there, you'll be able to download journaling and Power Hour, which I'll just quickly explain now. Journaling and Power Hour are the pillars that hold your personal development together, because journaling will help be like a mirror. It will help you to see all the different sides of you that need to change. If you want to look, by the way, not everyone does.
Well, that's it. You've got to be courageous to look at this stuff. It's not all plain sailing. It's worth it in the end when you come through it. But
it's painful.
As somebody said to me, it's scary at the start, messy in the middle, but worth it in the end.
It's a great analogy, Suzy. That's a great analogy. And another thing is, if you just want to concentrate on the basics, I always say to clients who have never been coached before, who've never read a self-help before, right, I say to them, write 4 squares on a page, and top left put thoughts, top right put feelings, bottom left put what you say, your words, bottom right you put what you do, your actions. If you just concentrate on those 4 things, what I think, what I feel, what I say, what I do, every time something's not working for you in your life, put it through that metric and think, am I thinking right about this? Or do I need to change my way of thinking, my perception? Do I need to have a different emotion around this because I'm getting too attached to the drama? Do I need to word it differently? And when I talk about words, I'm talking about the words that we talk to ourselves in a coach and a critic, or the words that we express to others. Am I kind of very Debbie Downer, kind of sucking the energy out of everyone? You know, am I very down in my poor old Debbie? Well, it's a bit like Billy No Mate, so I know how Debbie feels. And then the 4th one, you know, action. What am I doing? Am I doing the wrong thing to give me the outcome and consequences that I desire? Stick to those 2, you know, those 4 basics at the beginning, and you can literally look at your thinking, your feeling, what you're saying and what you're doing, and perhaps 1 or more, and they usually are, those need to shift first.
Yeah. And it's interesting you saying about the 4 corners, just doing that exercise, you can often see how your actions are out of alignment with what you're saying or what you're thinking, you know, and you suddenly like, oh, okay, I'm trying to convey this and it's totally not what I'm saying or thinking. But the journal writing as well. I mean, one thing that I find about journal writing, and before you did a coaching week in our group, I was always like, oh, I went to Tesco's, then did this, and then, you know, and honestly, I would just read back and go, oh my God, my life's so dull. You know,
just boyfriends, yeah.
Like life on the everyday stuff is very mundane. And if you're just recording your daily activities, that is mundane and dull and does not inspire anybody. But if you sit with a question, if you're thinking, what do I want? Or, you know, what's important to me? Why has this triggered me? Why am I angry about this? Why do I feel this way? If you just ask a question, the insights that come out, and it can be done in so quickly as 10 minutes. Sometimes it takes longer, but just start writing, and always write with the view that, you know, no one's ever going to read it. That's a challenge, because if you ever think that somebody's going to read it, it limits you. So thinking, actually, you know, just spew it all out into the page, and the insights that come out, that the inner wisdom that's there, that for all the answers are inside ourselves, but we don't realize it because, 1, we never stop and pause and think, give ourselves this gift of this time to ourselves. You know, we just do. So going forward, the one thing, you know, you're saying you want to target the people that have never really embraced a personal development practice, never really stopped to navel gaze, as they might call it.
Pause.
Just
for
pause.
Reflection, yeah.
You know, but there will be people that are like, do you know what, mate? I am just trying to get through the day. I have got to feed my family. I'm at risk of losing my job. I've got health issues, or they're just in survival mode, you know, and they are, you know, they don't, and this is the challenge. Personal development can be a very middle-class luxury. You know, it's all very well if you've got the money to buy the books and, you know, spend the time doing it or have a coach. But if you're in that position where you are surviving, you are just trying to get through the day, and you're doing what you have to do to survive and, you know, to meet the needs of your family, what would you say to that audience that are really struggling and going, yeah, all right, mate, it's all very well for you, but seriously, like, I'm just dealing with life here.
Is that a personal or a generic question, by the way? No, I think
a lot of people are in that situation.
No, you're right, and it really breaks my heart. It breaks my heart.
Yeah, and, you know, it's that thing, you know, 2 excuses I hear all the time is, I don't have money and I don't have time.
And they're plausible. They are plausible.
And I don't think we should discredit that.
No, not at all. So what I would say to that, what I'd answer to that is, you know, if you don't spend and I'm just going to read a little bit of this. If you don't spend the time, effort, energy on creating the life story that you want, then we all know that you're going to end up mopping up, and eventually you're going to waste a lot of time dealing with that unhappy life that you don't want anyway. So my answer to that would be, you're already putting effort and time and energy in. It's just you're putting it in the wrong place.
Yeah.
You are
Putting it
already
into somebody else's priorities.
And also you're going to experience pain anyway, right? If you're going through a really hard life, you are experiencing, like any human being, you're experiencing pain and you're experiencing suffering. Now, my question to ask and then to answer there would be, are you prepared to go through the pain barrier and have productive pain that moves you forward and upward? Or are you just running on autopilot, in which case you're having pain and suffering that is moving you backwards and downwards? Because either way, you're going to experience pain. Either way, you're going to waste emotion, drama, time, energy, impetus, inspiration. You're going to pour that down one hole, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. So
you may as well be more directive with it and put it into breaking through that's what is basically not working for you anymore. The word I love with clients in my first sessions is, one of the first questions I'll ask them, what are you tolerating in your life at the moment? What are you tolerating? Yeah. It's a great question. And then another question will be something like, if nothing changes, Suzy Beaumont, if nothing changes and you keep going on the next 2, 3, 4 years like this, where will you be and who will you be? And that should be enough. It usually scares 80 to 90% of my clients, because they realize, oh my God, if nothing changes, not only will it be the same, the way I'm going in a trajectory downhill, I'm probably going to be in a lot worse. And then the trough is going to be so deep, I probably won't get out of it. So I want people to realize and look forward. If nothing changes, you're probably going to be in doo-doo. You're really going to be in a place, and it's like a nosedive, isn't it? Once you kind of hit a nosedive at a certain point, I remember talking to a pilot once, and he said, I can pull myself out of a nosedive, but there comes a practical point where it's got such a velocity that I can't, whatever I do, pull it out of a nosedive. It will hit the ground. I think our lives are like that with personal development. We can still be spinning and feeling that we're out of control, but if we don't pull the nose up and pull out of the nosedive quick enough, it's pretty much set that it's too late. And what I mean by too late is that if we engineer an illness, an ulcer, or something more critical, it's too late then to kind of go, well, I need to start looking at mindset and personal development and the rest of it, because I'm letting my emotions take me over. It might be too late if you have a critical illness.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. It really is having an honest appraisal. I mean, practicalities, life does get in the way, but it start with 10 minutes a day. And people say, I value my health. And it's like, all right, okay, so what do you do? And, they're like, what do you mean? You say, well, okay, so you're hydrating well every day. You're sleeping well every night. You're eating nutritious foods that, help your body to thrive and survive and all the rest of it. You're, not drinking much. You're moving well, that you're doing stuff that brings you joy. And they're like, no, not doing. So you're like, okay, so again, you're saying you value your health, but you're not actually taking any action that backs that theory up. It's like, of course you value your health. We all want to be healthy. We don't want the chronic illness. But if we do not take action every day, illness will come in. It's unavoidable, and it will happen.
Well, Wayne Dyer. Sorry, Suzy. Wayne Dyer always said it. He took the Eastern philosophy. A journey of 10,000 steps starts with the first step.
Yeah.
And that's personal development. Do one thing today if you can. Do one thing, and do one thing tomorrow, and do one thing the next day. This is not big with a big B that you've got to dive both in. Read the book at the contents. Look at the kind of subjects that you might need to meet at the coalface. Like for a big one today, a lot of it, particularly for, I coach 80 to 90% of my clients are women, and successful women. And one of the biggest problems they find is that, especially the mothers, is that they cut everyone else a piece of the pie and they do not cut a piece of their own pie. And then, oh, the pie is empty again, I'll do without, I'll eat without, I'll eat without. Now, that's not good enough, because we can't keep giving to people unconditionally and doing things for other people if our energy tank is empty, because what starts to build is resentment. Well, I'm helping them and them and them. They're not giving it back to me, and I've got nothing left to give. I'll carry on giving. And it's almost like self-sacrifice. It's kind of a martyr syndrome, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know? And we've got to get to the point. We've got to get to the point of going, do you know what? If I put my own oxygen mask on first, if I fill my tank up first, I will then be able to give to a lot more people, including my loved ones, my children, abundantly without conditions.
It's the ripple effect. Yeah, and it's like, I mean, even if someone's listening to this and you just journal on it and saying, well, why am I not making myself a priority? Why do my needs come below everybody else? Because like you say, it's the ripple effect of building yourself up, becoming the best person that you can be, and then you change your environment that you are the best person for everybody else. You're a better mother, better father, better worker, co-worker, sibling, partner, the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of time, but I do want to talk about emotions, because you did pick up on that. And I do want to talk about love, because I have that belief that actually that's probably the root cause of most of our hurt and pain. We're either crying out for love or calling it. We're either giving love or crying out for it. And I think, a lot of us, you've got a whole chapter on love and listening to your heart and developing love. But what's your take on? So let's start with emotions first, and what emotions are actually there for, because they are a signal, aren't they? They're calling for us to change something.
Right. So everyone's got their own interpretation. I mean, Daniel Goleman, with his emotion intelligence, really broke the mold here, didn't he? He started to write about emotions in a big way. And then other people, Susan Cain came through, and several others, which I won't mention now, Joe Dispenza. There's some great writing now out on emotions now. Now, my interpretation, everyone's different. My interpretation is that emotions are there as part of our inner world to bring our inner world out to the surface. So if you're putting it another way, if your five senses, hearing, taste, all bring the outer world inside of you, your inner senses, which in a way are innocent, your inner senses, which are your inner world, inspiration, imagination, creativity, insight, intuition, and particularly love and all your emotions, they are your inner senses that are begging to come to the surface, to be expressed, to share with other people. We all know the science is overwhelming on this, particularly through Heart Math Institute in California. People that get ill are people that repress their emotions. Now, they often don't repress positive emotions. What do we tend to do with positive emotions that feel good? We tend to express them in the moment they arise. We celebrate, we get happy, we laugh. They're not a problem. Unless that's not true, actually, probably 99% of people do that naturally. There are a few percent of people that will even hold their happy, positive emotions back for various reasons I'm not going to go into today. But we want to get our emotions out there. And the problem with painful, distractive emotions like shame, guilt, hate, all the really negative energy ones, what we tend to do, rather than share them and express them, because our society basically, put up and shut up, I don't want you to share your negativity, we push it down like a beach ball. We've talked about many, many times. The beach ball is the emotions. And what do? Rather than let the beach ball fly up to the top, we push the emotion down. Us British are notoriously bad for this, and we have been for 200-300 years. We're one of the worst countries in the world. What do they do in South America? I've got friends that are Brazilian and South American,
Very
Argentine.
emotive, yeah.
What do? They're very emotive, a bit like the Latin in
Mm-hmm.
Italy and Spain. And what they do, whether they're happy or sad, they will still dance. They will still shake their body. People don't realize this when they look at the great pictures of the Rio Carnival and everything. The whole thing around kind of samba and salsa and the rest of it wasn't to express celebration and happy emotions. It was actually to dance away the negative emotions and shake them out of the body. A lot of people don't realize that. And so what we've got to do, we have to find, you've got to think of emotion like a life force. It's like an energy. If you keep negative emotions inside your body, overwhelmingly in different ways, you are going to get sick. You are going to get sick. The science is now overwhelming, and that's starting to build on that. Suppress hatred, suppress shame, suppress guilt, suppress remorse. Put all those negative emotions in your basement, and eventually that basement's going to fill up, and it's going to come through the floorboards, and it's going to affect and infect all different parts of your life. And I think with emotion, we've got to start getting more mature. Got to start getting more expressive and realizing these emotions are coming up, they're rising. They want to come to the surface. They want to be looked at. They want to be owned. They want to be taken responsibility for, and they want to be healed and moved on. What we've done for too long, we trap the emotions in the basement, and then we try and carry on with our life. There's a reason that people do something what in psychology we call is projection. That is like really bad day, bad week at the office, go home, kick the dog. Thankfully, you and I haven't got dogs because, the poor old dog's the one that gets it. But metaphorically, that's what happens. Road rage is the same. Someone cutting someone up at the roundabout, and then sort of getting them out of the car and smashing them up and sticking a knife in them. It's nothing about getting cut up at the roundabout. Yeah. It's the 20 times before that person has bottled those emotions up. What do we call it? We call it passive aggressive. We know when we meet people that are passive aggressive, they're like a simmering kind of can of emotions ready to blow. Yeah. And the slightest little trigger can send them over the top. It could be jumping the queue. It could be, not returning the phone call. It could be that. So what we've got to do in the next couple of decades, we've got to focus, and this is why I put it's probably the biggest chapter in the whole book on emotions, is that I found with all the years that we've coached, so much of it comes back to emotion.
Yeah. And it is one of the most challenging things because managing emotions is huge. You know that, somebody's annoyed you at work. You then go home, you take it home, you're still in a foul mood, you fall out with your partner, then they fall out with the kids, and before you know it, everybody's screaming, shouting, and just, and it does have that ripple effect. But even if you become aware of it, you're like, I know I'm in a bad mood, and I don't want to take it out on my family or whatever, so what do we do in those situations?
Well, first of all, you can't change anything that you don't notice, number one. That's why the journal comes in. Yeah. The journal will be a great way of recording where you've lost it, where you got oversensitive, where you kind of barked, where you kind of snapped at the kids, when you fell out with your partner. The journal will be a great, that Angie list that I talked about, top, middle, bottom, that will be a great way of you starting to notice, why do I keep getting triggered? Oh, hang on a minute, there's a common denominator here. I get triggered here, 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 and here. And guess what? Light bulb moment, it's with the same person. Yeah. Because you bothered to slow your life down, to pause, to reflect, to contemplate. You basically pulled off at the service station, taken 10 minutes for your journal and going, what's not working for me here with emotions? Because I seem to be like a cauldron of kind of repressed, angry emotions all the time now. That is usually because we've got lots of things in the past that we've not attended to. We might have no boundaries, so everyone seems to step over us all the time. My mother-in-law is always asking me to do things that I haven't got time for. I'm always expected to do something at the club. I'm expected at work to be the saviour for this project and pull everyone else out the mire. Whatever it is, we've all got our stuff to deal with. But if it becomes too much and you don't express your emotions honestly and openly at the time they arise, and don't forget, it's not just about sharing it with other emotions. emotions with other people. Some people, especially introverts, are not very good at that. So a journal work would be brilliant for them. But that's only one way of expressing emotions, or two: sharing your emotions openly or journaling. Now, the other ways would be exercise, walking, swimming, going out in nature, taking your dog out for a walk, art, creativity, cooking. Everybody's got different ways of expressing their emotion, and you have to find which way is going to work for you.
An emotion, I mean, it is, anger is a very powerful emotion. I mean, it can cause absolute destruction, but it can completely drive amazing creativity, or for you to be super productive. Because if you're driven by something that you're thinking, I want to change this, or this is not serving me, I hate this situation, then you go and change it and use the emotion of anger. So that's like, love is another one. It can be extremely destructive. It can be extremely creative, all emotions. So that is fantastic advice about driving it into something that, it can be a positive outcome. It can channel it, and, that energy, utilizing it to power.
I always say to clients, be the alchemist. Be the alchemist. Base metal into gold. What do you do? Take the anger, which is one of the higher hatred, anger, shame, guilt. They are the most powerful negative emotions. Now, the alchemist basically takes anger and they turn that into action. They take their pain and they turn that into power. I could mention loads of others, but I won't. But basically, you've got to take the raw material that's not working for you and turn it on its head 180 degrees and do something positive. We know that some of the greatest achievements creatively, comedians are a great example of this, Suzy, aren't they? Comedians will take intense pain from their suffering and their childhood and their abuse and trauma, and they will turn that into good stuff. It becomes comedy, which other people relate to, and then they can express their pain and sorrow.
And that's the really interesting thing about the emotion, shame, or embarrassment, that kind of thing. Like, when you are vulnerable enough to express it, you suddenly become hugely relatable. You give permission to somebody else to be human, to be empathetic, to be caring, to connect. I mean, and you've talked about this in our coaching group, Change Your World Every Day, that I run. You've been a regular coach on that, about FUPO, fear of other people's opinions. And that is, I think, fundamentally one of the things that holds us back in life. Constantly thinking, what will people think of me? What will my boss think? What will my mum think? What will my dad, what will my partner think? Holding us back. And any tips to get people over that? I mean, I know for me that the more I worked on myself, the more I became comfortable and confident in myself, that I came to a place of going, do you know what? I don't care. This is how I feel. This is what I think. This is what my values are. And that gave me the confidence and stand in my own truth. But how do you get to that point?
So like any healing, like any personal development, it's a process. If people believe, I truly believe in my heart that people are more powerful than we ever realize once they take their power back.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The problem is, for the last 200-300 years, we've lived in a society where constantly there are systems, hierarchies. The monarchy would be one of those. Big institutions, they keep us down because that's what the system, that's what the matrix does. It keeps us down here, and then we can't reach above because what will people think of me? Oh my God, what am I if I expose myself and put my head above the parapet? What will people really say to others? And then it comes back to primal, to tribal, doesn't it? That I'll be cast out of the tribe, and then what happened thousands of years ago? You literally starved to death.
And we are social beings. We are
social beings. We need to belong. The sense of belonging. John O'Donoghue talked about this in my favorite book, Adam Cara, which is Soul Friend. Amazing mystic and academic in Ireland, and he talks about a sense that we want a few basics in life. We want a sense of belonging. We want to achieve the best version that we can. We want to be loved, and we want to give love. that is my complexity to simplicity. You know, we now coming back to kind of where do we start with FOPO? There's no point just working on your fear of what other people think of you and will say for you, the rest of it. What you've actually got to do, you go on a process of personal development. It's called self-awareness. It's called like knowing your identity, knowing what you stand for. I got a name for it, which I borrowed from the psychologist Michael Gervais in America, who's coached many, many top people in the sports world. He calls it personal philosophy. Now, personal philosophy is there's a chapter in there as well. Now, personal philosophy is basically when you know who you are, what you stand for, what you value, what you tolerate from others and yourself. What are your non-negotiables? What you care about, what you love, what you like to do, what you won't do. When you know all that, you have a good sense of identity. You have a good personal philosophy. That is all personal development work, by the way. But when you have a sense of that, then you will come to realize not only what Oscar Wilde said, you know, be yourself, everyone else is taken, but you will come to realize that other people's opinion, you know, what did Wayne Dyer say? What other people think of me is none of my business.
Yeah, none of your business. Yeah,
and that's the secret, Suzy. Is you know, and I know, and any of our friends and clients that have been under our wing, you have to start at the beginning, because if you don't know yourself, then they are too easy blown over in the wind. And when you have got a strong sense of self, which personal development will give you, it doesn't matter what people said. You won't worry. You know, you'll take that mantra of, you know, do not let other people live inside your head rent free, because that's what you do with FOPO. You do let other people live in your head rent free, and that is no way to live.
Yeah, and it can cause paralysis. You know, just stops you moving forward. And it is that thing of just building strong foundations for yourself, so that somebody does criticize you, doesn't knock you, doesn't sway you. Yeah. And I mean, the interesting thing when you start doing this work is that when somebody makes a judgment of you, or you make a judgment of someone else, you often realize that flaw is in yourself, you know, and it's like,
it's a mirror.
Because it's saying to you, oh, you have that. And you're like, oh, I don't really like that quality. Or the flip side of it is you've got to be discerning about this. You know, you see something in somebody else, you make a judgment of it, and you're so triggered by it, it's because it's so against your own values and your own boundaries, and somebody's just stamped all over that. So again, there's learning there. So monitor the judgments that you have, because there's teaching there. You've either got that quality, trait in yourself, or somebody is stamping all over your boundaries and your values, and you have to make a change there to make sure that doesn't happen again. So we could continue talking, but I think we just need to tell people, where can they buy your book? So again, it's called Create Your Own Life Story. Why did you come up with that title, out of interest?
I mean, the red really was for heart. Red is an emblem for heart, isn't it? I is kind of imagination, blue sky thinking.
Yeah.
F is kind of freedom, and E is emotion. And you know, the word life, I think after the word love, is one of the most popular words in the world. And the reason I wanted create your own life story is that we do not realize the more you do personal development work, the more you study psychology, you realize that we've actually been suppressed unconsciously in many cases, but society's been kind of held down. Yeah. And we have to break through these social norms that have been around. You know, don't forget, in feudal times, in medieval times, you know, we were very subservient as a race, and we kind of went along with the crowd and what people expected of us, and kind of, better not stick your head above the parapet. Well, this is the time now to take our personal power back. And we've got to be the one that creates our own life story. No one else is coming to rescue us. No one else is coming to take our life over, take our problems over, you know, stroke us because we're feeling a bit of a victim. We've got to get out of victim mindset that the world's doing it to us. we've got to start from within. And if we create our own life story, and that could be a bad life story or a good life story, because, basically, coming back to
creating all the time, aren't we?
We are creators. We're manifestors. What's one of the most sold books in the last year is Manifest. And the reason we got to manifest our better life is that we're manifesting a life anyway, whether you're aware of it or not.
Yeah.
So
you're manifesting and creating it on autopilot, because this is 95% happening that you're not even aware of.
Of course. So start paying attention. If you're not getting delivered the life, if you're not creating the life story that you want, then start paying attention and be mindful of where you're putting your thoughts, what feelings you're tending to feel that are not serving you, what are you tending to sort of say, and you could be like down in your, putting yourself down all the time internally. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm too old. All of these kind of falsehoods, they are not true. They are what you've told yourself is true. There's a big difference, and the reason, and of course the other one is what do I do? But we've got to be careful, because science is starting to understand, we've linked up. I've done the Joe Dispenza weeks, we've done all the big, you and I have both done the Hay House and the big stuff. We've and the Change Your World events when you were doing them, before pandemic.
Pre-pandemic, yeah.
And so we understand, we've studied enough people, you and I, Suzy, to know the body, you have to be careful, because the body believes everything the head tells it. And I'm going to repeat that. The body believes everything the head tells it. So if you keep telling yourself bad things, you are going to feel bad. And if you keep telling it and reverse it and tell it good things, better thoughts, more life-enhancing thoughts and feelings and words. And don't forget, words are like spells. Anyone that said words are not important is absolute rubbish. A person's life can be changed. And I've had clients like this who, we've got the old saying, didn't we? Sticks and stones can't break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
Yeah.
My answer to that is bullshit. Bullshit. One sentence to a 6-year-old can be enough for them to carry. This sounds insane, doesn't it, by the way? But one derogatory sentence from your teacher, you're not going to be good enough, Johnny. Helen, you're never going to come something. You're always going to be porky.
You're not creative. You're not
creative. You're not this, right? One statement can be locked in, and over the next 10, 20, 30 years, you pour more and more belief on top of that disenfranchised thought. Before you know it, you're looking at the consequences of a life that doesn't feel like yours.
And it's so true. I mean, one thing I've always sort of struggled with writing, and I wrote a blog, and somebody said, "Oh, I love that. I wish you would write more." And then I was thinking, "Oh no, I can't write." And somebody challenged me and said, "Whose voice is that? Who's telling you that you can't write? You're not a good writer?" And I would just flash back.
Inner critic.
Yeah. Well, not just inner critic, but it was a teacher pulling me up about my grammar and me getting really anxious that I'd got it wrong in my grammar, and them not explaining to me how, words fit together and why it was supposed to go. And me I just zoned out and I shut down, and I was like, I can't do this. And then that went on into a boss pulling me up in my career and saying the same thing, triggering that same wound, and me then going, I'm not very good at writing. I can't write. So I had such confidence issues around writing. And I'm actually an extremely creative writer, but I hid that for so many years because I just thought, I'm not good enough. I can't do it. No, I get my grammar wrong. And yeah.
If you believe a lie enough, you'll make it your truth.
Absolutely.
That's what we say. And what are you going to create? And this is what the journal is brilliant at capturing. It captures all those false beliefs that are now 30 years worth of layers, by the way. It captures all those false beliefs that you can revisit now and go, that was never true, but I made it true. I turned that acorn into an oak tree, only it was a diseased oak tree of false perceptions about myself. But the great thing about the brain, and this is what neuroscience is about, and plasticity nowadays, Suzy, we can change things. Even in our 70s, 80s, 90s, we're never too old for change.
That's it. It's just reprogramming, and the conditioning that you've had, it's reprogramming. It can be change the dial. It can be changed.
Change your world.
Change your world, absolutely. Yes, as it says there, if you change yourself, you will change your world. If you change how you think, and you will change how you feel and what actions you take, and so the world around you will change.
Well done, well done, you. And if you want some more inspiration, I've got my Instagram account, Will.Murtha. Come over and send me a message. I'm trying to every day put at least posts that can uplift us, because we're all going through a really strange time of energy at the moment. Not just what happened last week, but the last few months since we come out of the tunnel. People are in a really strange energy place, and anything that can just give you a little couple of tricks, flicks, and come over to the Instagram account.
Yeah. That is the key. It is really connecting with people that are going to lift you up, are going to give you tools and techniques that are going to keep you supported and motivated when you feel like giving up, when you've had a bad day. There's a tribe there. So you obviously do one-to-one coaching. You've got all your online stuff. We'll put all the links in the down below, and you're part of my Change Your World Everyday coaching group as well. So
our family,
the Change Your World Everyday family, as I call it. Sounds like the mafia.
I prefer family, but
not cult or anything like that.
Cult's worse, but
incredible personal development resource, and an amazing community of coaches and people that are working very hard on to change their life, to change things that don't serve them anymore. So, but we'll put all the links below. Thank you again, Will. You are a true inspiration. I love hearing your story. I never get tired of hearing your wisdom and hearing your near-death experience story. Again, I'm going to flash up the books. You've got another one, actually. Honestly, I look like a total groupie with all your books. You've got 100 Words, 200 Visionaries. That's another one, a book of lots of inspiration from lots of different people around the world. Dying for a Change, and of course your latest book. And people can get this from your website. Is that right?
You get it go to our store, and you can get our journals and the book on the store at the website. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you once again, Will. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll see you in the group, no doubt. But keep up the good work.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having me on. That's lovely.